But first, we start with a Fox News alert. Brand new details from the CDC on that female nurse who was the first person ever to be infected with Ebola right here on U.S. soil.
This as new questions are raised about whether America's hospitals are prepared to fight the deadly virus. This is happening right now.
At some point, there was a breach in protocol, and that breach in protocol resulted in this infection.
A potentially deadly mistake causes a nurse to become the first person to contract Ebola here on U.S. soil.
How are they going to alert the neighborhood who's been around that person?
Now, searching for answers on what went wrong in Texas after government reassurances that the virus was contained.
There is nobody in charge. We need somebody in charge.
But first, we start with our top story. The Centers for Disease Control warning that more health workers could be at risk for Ebola this hour. That after that nurse tested positive for the virus in Texas. Welcome to Happening Now. I'm Eric Shawn in for John Scott.
And I'm Heather Childers in for Jenna Lee. Health officials say that the nurse became infected while treating Thomas Eric Duncan. The Ebola victim died last week after traveling from Liberia to visit family in Texas. A hazmat crew cleaning outside the apartment building of the infected nurse in Dallas. The CDC director now apologizing for giving the impression that the nurse was to blame for contracting Ebola despite wearing protective gear.
Right now, Alicia Kuna is live in Dallas with the very latest. So, Alicia, first question is, how is she doing today?
Hi, Eric. Well, the last report was that she was in stable condition. We just received an update from the CDC director, Dr. Tom Frieden, who said that she is being closely monitored in isolation. The CDC says that she had been exposed to Thomas Eric Duncan, the man from Liberia who died last week of Ebola. And while the nurse wore the required protective gear, Dr. Frieden said that it was a breach in protocol that caused the transmission. He addressed that today.
People on the front lines are really protecting all of us. People on the front lines are fighting Ebola. The enemy here is a virus, Ebola. It's not a person, it's not a country, it's not a place, it's not a hospital. It's a virus. And it's a virus that's tough to fight.
Now, doctors say it is actually the removal of that protective gear when workers can be the most vulnerable. This healthcare worker's family has requested privacy, so, Eric, there's very limited information on her right now.
All right, Alicia, and what's being done now to try to control the spread, especially when you deal with those type of hazmat suits and the protocols that they have when they are dealing with an infected patient?
Yeah, and Eric, this is an ever-changing protocol as we are learning here, but Dr. Frieden said that right now he wants hospitals across the country to think Ebola. When someone walks in to an emergency room with a fever, that has to be on the list of considerations here. As for the cases here in Dallas, there are teams on the ground interviewing anyone who had possible contact with both the nurse and Duncan. Duncan is known as the index patient here, so they can develop a map of potential exposures.
We need to consider the possibility that there could be additional cases, particularly among the healthcare workers who cared for the index patient when he was so ill. That's when this healthcare worker became infected.
And even a single infection, Dr. Frieden says, is unacceptable. Eric?
That is for sure. And so far in this country, we've had 2, and they say there will be a possibility of more. Alicia, thanks so much. Heather?
Meantime, a sick passenger prompting an Ebola scare on a cross-country flight. A United plane taken to a remote runway shortly after landing at Los Angeles International Airport yesterday. Investigators say a female passenger who was recently in Africa started vomiting and exhibiting flu-like symptoms on a flight that originated in New York City. Fellow passengers fearing the worst, including this new mom on board.
I'm sobbing, thinking, well, she's 10 months old. Her immune system's probably not up to par compared to all of us.
Well, public health officials, they checked out the passenger who had not been to South Africa, had been to South Africa, not West Africa, and they believe that she was not exposed to Ebola, and there was no risk of infection to anyone on board.
Yeah, that gives you an indication of some of the concerns that are out there now. And, of course, this new case of Ebola in Dallas sparking other worries among some that the disease could spread even further. Do you think health officials really are doing enough to stop more possible cases? And what happens if there are? We will examine all of these vital questions a little later on in our newscast. And of course, we also want to hear from you. Does the CDC, do you think, have a handle on Ebola? Should the head of the CDC step aside, or are you reassured by his news conferences? Do you think there will be more cases? Take a look at our live chat. It's up and running right now. All you have to do is go to foxnews.com/happeningnow, click on America's Asking, and you can join the conversation. We want to hear about it. Bring it to you later.